the thought of ejecting never even crossed my mind at the time because it all happened within fractions of seconds, and the mishap happening, my reaction time, the engines, spooling up to full power when they did, all those little minor miracles that had to happen to keep me alive and keep the airplane in the air, or like back in the air, were pretty crazy, but I never thought about ejecting at the time.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of The Report. Today, I am super excited because I got someone who is in the aviation space, and I got a little background in aviation myself, being an air traffic controller for 11 years. But excited for this conversation, guys, to talk shop. I got my man, Josh Cabo Gunderson. Josh, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, appreciate you coming on, man, and very excited. I would say since I've been a kid, I've nerdly just been really I just geek out on aviation. Whenever I see an airplane fly by, I'm like, oh my God, I just stop and stare. I literally still watch airplanes to this day from my place here in downtown San Diego, land and take off. And it's just super fascinating to me, even at age 38, dude. So thank you for coming on. I'm excited.
I think aviation is one of those things, even if you understand your background in air traffic control or flying, when you see an airplane flying, there's something magical. And when it's especially when it's little kids growing up and seeing airplanes flying, the sparkle in their eyes, them being very excited about aviation and inspiring them to do whatever they want to do. If they want to get into, whether it's medicine, be a doctor, lawyer, teacher, whatever it is, aviation is such an amazing way to inspire folks. And it's been one of the things that's kind of led me down the path I've been in my life, and I'm super thankful for all the doors it's opened and the connections I've made and friendships through the military and on the civilian side as well.
Yeah, I feel like boats and airplanes have always been a thing for me, and I think that's why I love San Diego, because it's I get to watch these airplanes land and take off, and then the boats are down there in the bay, so it's the best of both worlds. But tell us, what do you do exactly in the aviation space?
So I just left the active duty Air Force about a year ago. I was full-time in the Air Force. I went to school at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Then from there, went and flew multiple jets in the Air Force for about 15 years. I'm now part-time in the Air National Guard in Nevada. So I work down at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, working on operational tests in the fighter world. And then the rest of the aviation space is civilian. So I fly a corporate jet out of Reno, and that's where I live. And I also have
Are you based out of Reno?
Based out of Reno.
What do you fly?
It's a Challenger. So it's a corporate jet, and absolutely love it.
A 300?
A 300, yeah. And then what's really interesting is this job wasn't what I was looking for initially when I was getting out of the Air Force. And paths closed, doors opened, and this became available. And man, I'm super thankful that I took this path. It's opened a lot of things in terms of opportunities in other spaces for me, and I'm super thankful that it's kind of worked out. It was just a very little known area for me, because most military pilots will go to the airlines, commercial airlines or FedEx or UPS or whatever. And when those doors started closing based off them just turning off their hiring pipelines.
Really? I didn't know that they were cutting back on the hiring. I always thought right now was a great time to get into the airlines.
You'd think, right? And I think actually the airline just came out recently and said that they are not going to hire any more pilots for the rest of the year.
Really?
And interesting,
Which airline was that?
I think all of them, the majors, yeah. I have to go
why
back
is that? Because I always was under the impression that there was a big demand for pilots because a lot of them are aging out right now.
There still is a big demand for pilots, and a lot of the regionals and smaller carriers are still hiring folks. But I think the major airlines were oversaturated with pilot applicants and leaving the military, leaving whatever other, sector of aviation. And interestingly enough, I was doing an air show in Memphis, Tennessee in 2022. It was in, I think it was June of 2022. And 95% of the military pilots, whether it's Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, all go to the airlines, and that was the path that I thought that I should go down. It's lucrative and all these other good things, right? So I made connections at FedEx, and that looked very promising at the time. And then in October of 2022, they stopped hiring, and they actually haven't hired a pilot since for FedEx, which is crazy. But they boosted their hiring dramatically during COVID because there's a massive demand signal for all the shipping, whether it's Amazon or whatever it was. People were shipping packages, and FedEx got a huge increased demand for what they needed. So they overhired for pilots, and then they were like, ooh, we hired too many. So now we had to back off a little bit. And it was just unfortunate timing, or fortunate, however you look at it, for me, where they stopped hiring and I had to look elsewhere for employment once I left the Air Force. And the corporate job has been phenomenal. I get a chance to work with somebody and fly for somebody that's phenomenal, that I respect tremendously. And it's just like it's amazing to see somebody who's been successful, but is also an amazingly good human being in terms of morals, ethics, etc. Getting to fly with, fly for him. The other pilot I fly with is the same person. We don't swap crews. It's just two of us. So it's really a small family kind of feel, and it's been amazing to be able to be a part of that team.
Yeah, I love that. So what's the main difference between flying, for a private exec jet type of thing, versus the airlines on the pilot side, at least?
I think, so there's, and for the folks that aren't familiar, we have different kinds of, certifications from the FAA. You have 121, which is kind of your commercial carriers, and they're going to, have passengers in the back, flight attendants, and they're oftentimes going to be doing, it's all seniority based. So when you start off, you're going to be flying a lot of trips. You're going to be doing a lot of like overnights and all those things. So your work and or schedule is pretty demanding early on. And then eventually, after you top out on the seniority list, maybe 12 years with the company, you have now gotten to the top pay scale, et cetera. What's really neat about the corporate world is that I fly Part 91, which is just general aviation. So it's just somebody that has an airplane, and I fly for that person. You also have 135, which is a charter operation, and that's, your net jets, that's whoever. And a little bit different, some differences between Part 91, which is what I do, and 135. But the Part 91 side is really great because I can fly, you get type rated in an airplane. So any jet kind of aircraft, you have to get certified in that aircraft and get, specific training on that airplane. Once you have that type rating, you are now the ability to go and work for anybody. So like they have contract trips that you can do 1099 employment and be able to go pick up extra trips. I mean, some of these larger aircraft, you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars a day just to fly from point A to point B. And oftentimes you have a layover where you just kind of are sitting there and you're getting paid per day to have a layover, which means you can do all these side hustles, you can invest, you can do all these other things while you're getting paid to, sit on a beach in Cabo, San Lucas, so they're just really cool opportunities that the corporate aviation space allows you to take advantage of. And I think, once again, aviation is just an amazing career for me, and it's been something that I've really enjoyed.
Well, and not to mention the networking component of it. So, what's his name? Is it Adam? It's something Seiko, but it's like Grant Cardone's like pilot for his Gulfstream is now like full time on his team, helping him grow like the multifamily investing arm of Cardone Capital, and has like a high level like leadership position. But he started off as like Grant's pilot. Like that's pretty sick, right?
Yeah, and I think I saw some of you on one of your podcasts that was talking about how your proximity to other people really influences how you grow and develop as a human being. And that's another thing that's so great about flying corporate is that if you fly for somebody that's like a Grant Cardone or whoever it is, you're exposed to that knowledge and you're exposed to that mindset every single time you work with them, and you can't help, right, but learn and absorb that knowledge unless you just like completely wall yourself off and don't listen. You're forced to grow and to learn and think about things in a different way. And unless you're exposed to those kind of environments, you're just not familiar with it. So that's a great example that you're talking about. And once again, I'm very thankful that I get to learn and observe somebody who's been very successful in life and get to learn those lessons.
Yeah. So what jets did you fly when you were in the Air Force?
So I primarily flew the F-15C Eagle, and then I went from the F-15 after about 4 years of flying that to the F-22. Both of those airplanes, for people who aren't familiar, are air-to-air fighters. They're both single-seat airplanes. So you're, we joke and say you're the mayor of Cockpit City, right? You run everything. You run the navigation, the aviation, the radios, the weapons employment, the radar. You run all these things, and your job is optimized, or your airplane's optimized for air-to-air combat, which means killing other airplanes. That could be used in a variety of ways. We have examples of a sitting alert where we basically protect the border and the airspace around our country. You have examples where you are escorting in airlift airplanes, so whether it's C-17s or transport airplanes that are providing humanitarian aid and assistance or delivering Army folks on the ground. You have A-10s that are providing close air support for our 18-year-old airman with a rifle or a soldier with a rifle on the ground, and you're protecting those A-10s from bad guy airplanes. So it's a very, very dynamic scenario where air-to-air combat can be started from 100 miles away, and it's over in a matter of minutes. So you're not only flying this airplane, but you're also managing all these things, and you're part of a team, and it's happening very quickly. So I really enjoy that element of it. And both those airplanes, the F-15 was the preeminent fighter at the time, air-to-air wise. The F-22 replaced it, which is kind of why I switched over to that airplane and got a chance to fly
Is
that.
the F-22 the one like at the air shows that can like land like this?
No, that's the Harrier.
That's
So
the
the
Harrier.
AVAB
Okay.
Harrier.
Okay.
Yep. Marine Corps actually is phasing that out now, and the Marine Corps now has the F-35B, which is the vertical takeoff and landing version of the F-35. The
So it can land
F-35,
anywhere.
It can. There's some interesting things with that airplane, the vertical takeoff and landing component. So they removed some of the fuel capacity, so it has less range because they had to put this huge fan, right? And some of the folks I've talked to that fly that airplane, the fan is right behind the cockpit. So it sounds like a washing machine. It's kind of, it's really funny how they
Why'd they have
describe
to
it.
put the fan there?
I'm assuming it's just for stability in terms of the flight controls in the aircraft itself. Yeah.
Got it. What's the fastest you've ever gone in a jet?
Around twice the speed of sound.
So what is that, like Mach 2.0? Mach 2? What do you guys call it?
Yeah, Mach 2.
Okay. Because when I was in the ATC days, well, I worked at LA Center for 6 years and I worked at SoCal Approach for 5 years. At LA Center, I did all sorts of different altitudes, but we did anything. The area I was in was mostly west of Vegas. Actually, we would work a little bit east of Vegas too. So actually flights that were coming from the East Coast into Vegas, we'd work. And then we work high altitude stuff over like Vegas and Needles and that sort of thing. But one of our sectors was like 34,000 feet and above. And so sometimes we would assign like, above the Mach. What did we ever? No. It was like typically the airline is like Mach 8 something to like Mach 9 something. So it was never above the Mach 1.
Well, I have actually a really funny story, and this is with air traffic control as well. I was dropping off an airplane for an air show in North Dakota. It was at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, and I was taking that jet there, just a static display. So I was talking to people. This is before I was on the F-22 demo team, and I had to leave on Sunday and get that jet to Salt Lake, to Hill Air Force Base in Salt Lake City, Utah, for depot level maintenance. So this is like, every 5, 10, depends on the airplane, number of years, they have to go in and do some pretty invasive maintenance to make sure the airplane's good to go and inspections, etc. The Thunderbirds started late, and then, they took their time to do their show. So I was kind of late getting out of Minot, North Dakota, and had to get back to Salt Lake. So I get airborne, and I'm over North Dakota, over South Dakota, and there's nobody there. You're looking down. So I think it was like 38,000 feet, 40,000 feet, something like that. And I asked the controller, I was looking at the time to go, like how much time I had to get to Salt Lake. And there were some contract employees that were waiting to catch the airplane to put into maintenance, but they had a drop dead time of like 5 p.m. or whatever it was. So I asked the controller, I was like, hey, do you have any issue with me going supersonic here? Because the Raptor, one of the really cool things about the Raptor is that it does super cruise, which means we can go supersonic speeds and hold those speeds without using afterburner. So afterburner,
so pretty fuel efficient for going that fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's, some airplanes like the F-15, F-16 can get above the Mach, and barely above the Mach with mil power, so not using afterburner. But the F-22 will cruise well above the speed of sound without using afterburner, no big deal. So I asked the controller, I was like, hey, any issue with me going going supersonic here? And he's like, yeah, how fast do you want to go? I was like, oh, it's 1.2 will get us there, And he was like, approved.
Yeah.
So I'm like, great.
Approved as requested.
Yeah,
Cleared as requested.
1.2 Mach at like 40,000 feet cruising, looking at the time to go to Salt Lake. I'm like, I'm going to be early. This would be great. And then like a minute later, he's like, yeah, the supervisors came by and saw what was going on and said we can't do that anymore. So
should have kept his mouth shut.
I know, right? But it was pretty funny. That was the only time that I've not been in a military training airspace and been approved to go supersonic. Yeah.
That's too funny. So is there really like a sonic boom when you go over the speed of sound?
There is. You don't hear it in the cockpit because it's behind you, but there definitely is a sonic boom.
So you would hear it here on the ground if you're up at like the 40,000 feet, let's just say.
I don't know how much you'd hear it if a jet was at 40,000 feet. I'm not sure how much you'd hear on the ground. Obviously, if you're lower, you could definitely hear it. And a funny story, I was living in Alaska. I was stationed there for about 4.5 years, and I like doing outdoor stuff, hunting, fishing, hiking, camping.
Where in Alaska?
So I lived in Anchorage.
Okay.
And I was stationed at Elmendorf Air Force Base, and interestingly enough, I was on a caribou hunt.
What?
A caribou hunt.
What's
so like
that?
A reindeer.
Okay.
So we're going hunting in the fall, and normally if an animal hears a rifle sound or whatever it is, they'll usually scatter, right? The caribou were so desensitized from the sonic booms because their training airspaces were right over where we were hunting. They were so desensitized to the sounds that they didn't move when you shot a rifle. It was crazy. It was like the weirdest thing. But yeah, I mean, that's just to show that if you're low altitude, there definitely is a sonic boom, and you can definitely hear that, on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. What's like the craziest maneuver that you've ever done in a fighter jet?
I wouldn't say there was like a crazy maneuver. Doing the air show thing, I was able to do everything that showcases the F-22 performance and maneuverability.
You would fly the air shows?
Yeah, I did that for 3 years. So I was the demonstration
badass.
team commander and pilot. So I was in charge of 14 people and about $300 million in airplanes every weekend. And we traveled around to different air shows around the country and the globe. doing performances, also talking to schools. So we would pick about 2 to 3 schools every city we went to, and then went and spoke to students, everything from like elementary through university students, and obviously catered the discussion to that. But talked about the Air Force opportunities, et cetera, and how, at least for us, aviation was a way that kind of inspired us to achieve our goals. My family originally is from Cuba, at least the majority of them. They moved to the States in '66, and nobody in my family, at least immediate family, flew airplanes or was in the military when I was wanting to go in the military. And for me, aviation really allowed me to kind of pursue my goals, go to school, get it paid for, open up amazing doors, get to fly the coolest jets in the world. And sharing those stories is really impactful for students on the air show circuit. And we did about 25 to 30 shows a year doing that. But it was an amazing, amazing gig, and super thankful for the team that I was a part of and got to lead over the course of those 3 years.
Dude, so the folks that are doing the formation flights, like the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels, I'm always impressed when I go to air shows and I watch them. I'm like, how the fuck did they get so close at that speed, literally like within feet of each other? And like literally, you would think there'd be a lot more mistakes. How did they do that without many mistakes?
Lots of training, so I've gotten a chance to fly with the Thunderbirds on a couple occasions, and I think the Thunderbirds, the Blue Angels, do a phenomenal job in terms of just flying, but also inspiring the American public and then, audiences around the globe. And it's just a matter of like everything in life, when you go run a marathon, if that's your goal, you don't go run a marathon on day one unless you're David Goggins and just say like, screw it, I'm going to go run a marathon today, but like you build up to it. And the same thing with them, they start these maneuvers, and every year about half the team swaps out for those teams. So they start off flying further away from each other. They get closer and closer and closer until they get that confidence and trust in each other. And what I was doing with F-22, we also flew in the Heritage Flight program, which is, we do our single ship show, which showcases all the maneuverability of the F-22. And like I was saying, the F-22 is the most maneuverable jet that we've ever produced as a nation and or any other country in the world. So doing backflips and cartwheels, like doing things that don't make sense with a 60,000-pound airplane. But we also got to fly the Heritage Flight Foundation, missions as well, which was pairing up aircraft from World War II and, contemporary, basically World War II, Vietnam, Korea era airplanes the Air Force used. And we fly with those airplanes side by side with contemporary fighters and do a routine with them. So we get to fly closely as well closely together with them. But, the difference there is we have two different airplanes, a P-51, which flies very different than an F-22 or an F-16 or an A-10. And, so we don't fly nearly as close as the Thunderbirds and Blue Angels because they're flying the exact same kind of airplane. But ultimately, in all those scenarios, it really comes down to trust and comfort with the people you're flying with in that relationship. Like everything else in life, it's all really based on relationships and trust. And they build that over 3 to 4 months in the off season.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was flying for a little bit with a company called SetJet. It's like a shared, you basically buy a seat on a private jet, not your own private jet, but you buy a seat. And as a membership, I think it was only $99 a month at the time. And literally, I joined probably a month before they like went under, but took a trip out to Scottsdale. And on the way out there was like us and like 6 other folks. And on the way back, the stewardess was like, hey, you guys are going to have the whole plane all to yourselves. And so literally for like a $900 ticket from Scottsdale to San Diego, we had an entire CRJ, was it 50 or CRJ 500? I forget what they call them. But anyway, so literally had the whole jet to ourselves on the way back. And I was like, dude, this is an awesome perk. I didn't know how they're going to stay, in business, but ultimately they ended up going under about a month later. But there's some other like carriers out there that kind of do the same service. I think JSX is one of them. What are your thoughts on that model?
Aviation in general is a very, very tough market. Like the margins are not very big, even for the major airlines, Delta, et cetera. Like they're not making money hand over fist. And especially the charter operations. You look at the margin for error in those companies, there's very little margin. If something happens, like if one of their airplanes is a mishap, they're not going to survive that most likely. So they have to be very discerning in terms of who is maintaining the airplane, who is flying the airplane. And, there's a company in Vegas, Thrive Aviation, who does a phenomenal job. And they're what's so impressive is like their entire team is very OCD in terms of process and safety and all the ways that they operate their business. It has to be very, very methodical in terms of how they run it. Because like sometimes people are like, I want to start a charter company and fly jets, and that's great. But like I said, if the margins hair thin. You can't afford to
Why is
have.
that, you think? Because I know, like, the restaurant industry is one of the toughest industries to make. It's very competitive, and, like, a good restaurant will do, like, single-digit margins. But, like, in the aviation industry, is it just because like, there's so much competition where they gotta, like, keep their prices low in order to compete, or why do you think that is?
I think it's also a function of just like sheer cost, right? Like, what does it cost to buy a Challenger? What does it cost to buy a Gulfstream? What does it cost to rent a space and open a restaurant? Like the sheer amount of money going into that. Then you have to have a fleet of aircraft. You're also paying people, that have been flying airplanes for years and years or maintaining airplanes. Also, fuel cost is variable, and like that variability in fuel cost is going to be probably a lot more variance than food products, right? So and it's also a discretionary thing, right? You don't have to take a private jet somewhere. In many cases, you have to eat. So even if it's fast food, like you have to eat, and sometimes people choose that as an option for convenience and time. It's way more palatable to say I'm going to spend $10 on a fast food meal to fulfill a basic human need of eating versus spending a couple $1,000 on a private jet.
Yeah, but even, like, the major airlines, let's just say, I think people, to a certain degree, are gonna choose to fly, Southwest or American, especially if they need to go halfway across the country to visit family or whatever it might be. Like, you came out from Vegas today, you guys flew out here, would you guys fly Southwest?
Southwest, yeah.
So, for you guys, like, it's almost cheaper to fly than it is to drive once you factor in the time component, renting a car, and maybe you get a traffic ticket or pulled over along the way, and now it's a lot cheaper to fly. So from that perspective, it's inelastic. But here's the thing where I'm like shocked. I feel like the cost of an airline ticket today, relatively speaking to like how much inflation's gone up over the last 20, 30 years, is not that much more than it was 20 years ago. Even though fuel prices, everything is way more expensive, the cost of an aircraft is as well. Like, why is that?
I think one of the things that's been really good for the airlines is that they're operating much more efficiently in terms of how they load aircraft, right? So most times you go to if you fly commercial, you go to the gate and they'll be offering a $500, $1,000, whatever voucher because they've overbooked the flight. So they consistently overbook every flight to make sure every seat's taken. 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for people to get on an airplane. There'd be open seats, just because they weren't booking to capacity and there wasn't that level of like precision. And now they've got a lot of automation that goes into making these as efficient as possible, whether it's the scheduling, the flying. I mean, you look at every airline out there, they're going to be to the minute in terms of fuel on the airplane, because that additional fuel is weight. That extra weight is going to be decreased performance and efficiency. So they're like flying down to exactly what they need for that flight, and then they're going to fuel at the next one. They're not going to fly fat in terms of like extra gas and less efficiency. So I think they found a lot of efficiencies in that. And that's through a lot of technology, a lot of automation, a lot of like just systems and processes that have made them a little bit more efficient over time.
Yeah. The headset that you had me put on before we started recording, that was really cool. Walk me through exactly what that was.
Okay, so that was kind of an idea that I had. I like visual and like creative things, and when I started the demonstration team job, there was very very little footage in the cockpit of the F-22. My predecessor, Loco, started flying with a GoPro in the cockpit, and with Air Force and security processes, it takes a long time to get that approved to even put in the airplane. But we had never done anything immersive like 360. So when I started the demo team job, I was like, one of my goals is to really create an immersive experience for people, because it's a single seat airplane. I can't take people flying with me. So how do I do that? And the solution I kind of came to was, let me get a 360 camera in the jet. And these were coming out at the time. GoPro Max is the one I used. There's obviously Insta360 and other ones as well. But we put it in the airplane. It's got two fisheye lenses that get stitched in post to then create this 360 image. And we took that file and we started putting it in Oculus goggles. And we bought a couple of those Oculus goggles and we took them with us to schools. So that way students could put these on, and as opposed to me showing them a video or talking to them and describing what it is to fly in an airplane and go up, go upside down, go in the pure vertical, I could give them these goggles that we've now, added these videos to, and they can sit in a chair, look in all directions, and simulate as if they were in the cockpit with me flying the air show, which is really cool. And we have a lot of those videos. I mean, I have tons of videos from different sites we flew at. So it was amazing in a couple ways. One, for the recruiting aspect and like just the inspiration aspect of students that we're talking to at schools. but also there was an element of training. So when I had to, train my replacement, he had that tool to be able to fly in the air show and see that whole environment and, what it looks like from the cockpit since it's only one seat before he started actually flying it. And it just increased safety and all those things. But, I always think technology gives us opportunities to expand the envelope in terms of how we want to use it to advance things. And that was an easy sell for me in terms of how do I impact people in a really positive way and give them a more immersive experience. So what you saw today was Hawaii. I was at Kaneohe
It was
Bay.
sick.
Yeah, so I was in that was in MCAS Kaneohe Bay, so Marine Corps Air Station on Oahu, and that was an air show in the summer of 2022. And yeah, it was really cool. You take off, you have this amazing view of the cove there, especially in the low altitude passes. You're seeing people out there on the paddles, paddle boards and like canoes and whatever else, and they're just like waving. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. Like I put this headset on and Josh is like, "Hey, put this headset on and like sit down in the chair." So I'm in the office and literally like wherever I turn my head, you could look at the left side of the plane, the right side, up, down, and like then he started doing some like rolls and all that sort of thing. It was really cool, but the view and the scenery coming out of that departure was just incredible.
As a busy real estate investor or entrepreneur, time is money and first impression is everything. Every day to make it easy on myself, I wear Built Basics clothing. Whether you're a girl or guy looking for workout gear, joggers, shirts, button-downs, hats, or shoes, Built's got you covered. Super comfortable, tight in all the right places to make you look fresh and clean all the time. Visit BuiltBasics.com and use promo code SUMMERS20 to receive 20% off of your order. Again, that's BuiltBasics.com. That's BYLT Basics.com. Use promo code SUMMERS20 to receive 20% off of your order. Now back to the show.
I actually, a lot of people, I don't talk about this ever, but a lot of people don't know this about me, but I actually have my private pilot's license from 2009, I want to say. I got it down here in Gillespie Field in San Diego, and it was right when I was starting my air traffic control career. And yeah, I flew, LA Center had a plane. It was an Archer, a PA-28, a 181, and yeah, it was 180 horsepower, and it was like a 1984 plane. But anyway, so it was up in Palmdale, California, where the center is, and there was like 12 of us that like paid into this club and flew this plane. But like most of the people in the club, they never flew it, and so it was almost like having your own small plane. And I used to rip that thing all the time. Vegas, Tahoe, like put the snowboards in the back, go up to Tahoe, go snowboarding. Actually flown into Reno multiple times on that plane, and then Catalina Island. And when I came down here in 2015 to go like transfer to SoCal Approach, I just like kind of just got over it and I completely stopped flying. I haven't flown since then. I still have the license in my wallet, but I would need to do a biannual, like a BFR, biannual flight review to get current again. But I just don't really have any interest in doing it anymore. I'd rather just sit in the back of the plane and just pop a drink and hang out.
Yeah, to me,
For me personally.
yeah, and I think it really comes down to, I think that's what's cool about aviation, right? And similar to cars in the sense that you have a truck and it does a certain thing. You have a sports car does a certain thing. You have a sedan does a certain thing. Like they all have different missions. And flying fighter jets, to me, was really important, right? I described it to my mom one time as the airplane was the car. Like I'm driving to work and I'm driving back from work in the airplane, and when I get there, I'm using it as a tool. And in the fighter aviation world, it's like, hey, we're killing things and breaking stuff, and that's what we're doing to protect the people on the ground, protect the nation, etc. But I kind of look at the airplane as like a tool to just get to and from work, and then you do what I'm doing. But yeah, to me, like just flying to and from places is not super exciting. I think the memories you can create in terms of closing the gap of distance between point A and point B, whether it's going to Tahoe to ski, whether it's going to Catalina Island for lunch, or whatever it is, right? The airplanes facilitate that, which is really nice. And I still, I just enjoy flying. It to me is, I've done it for so long, for over 20 years now. So I just enjoy that aspect of it. But I definitely can see the appeal of just climbing up the stairs and turning right instead of turning left,
Yeah.
and getting the back.
What I think the other thing is like, I would fly probably at first it was like once every week, and then it was like once every 2 weeks, then it was once a month, and then it was like once every 6 weeks. And so the less frequent you fly, the more foreign everything is, getting in the cockpit, going through your checklist. And I got into a couple like hairy situations, but like, the less frequent you're in the cockpit, the more dangerous it is. And then you're like, you got other people's lives in your hands and all that sort of thing. And you got to pre-flight, check the weather. There's all these things you got to like worry about. And I'm just like, I'd better just get into a plane and not have to think about those things. But I get the aspect of flying. I'm still like, I still miss the whole aviation thing. I'm still super nerdy into it. It's just I'd rather just go up in someone else's plane at this point rather than spend all the time. But I'd love to go up with you sometime.
Yeah,
That
next
would be
time I'm in
sick.
San Diego, we'll go up and go upside
Yeah.
down and do all the
Oh, dude, I'd
flips and
love that.
tricks. It'll be sweet.
You have an RV9, 11?
RV8 right now.
RV8,
Yeah,
okay.
looking at some other options in the future, but
That's
right
an
now RV8.
aerobatic plane?
It is. It's yeah. I use it primarily just for commuting back and forth.
How come you guys didn't fly out from Vegas today?
So the airplane's in Reno right now.
Okay.
So we headed up there. We had a plan to fly a Cirrus, and then there was a TFR. So for those who aren't familiar, a temporary flight restriction because President Biden was in Vegas speaking. So we couldn't rent an airplane to fly out here, actually, unfortunately, because all the air traffic was shut down in Vegas. But yeah, when we come back out here next time, we'll bring it out. We can go flying. That'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down. I'd love to. I'd be honored to get up there with you. Speaking of TFRs, whenever there was like any presidential, we would call it VIP activity, like into Vegas or whatever, it would shut down the airspace, but we'd have to go into like crazy intense holding, which we hated doing that, but it's part of the game.
It's funny. So I was actually, every time there's a TFR, a lot of people don't realize this. If there's a presidential TFR, there are usually fighters airborne at all times, and the president's on the ground. So to make sure that nobody is encroaching upon that airspace. And President Obama, when his first trip to Alaska, was out doing like a Bear Grylls episode. They were like fishing for salmon in Seward, Alaska. And at the time, I was actually an F-22 overhead with Colonel Tellez, who's another guy. He was a squadron commander up there at the time. And we're just in there orbiting in F-22s over Seward, Alaska, as he's fishing with Bear Grylls, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah, it's a lot of really neat experiences doing that sort of thing. And then also the mission. But aviation, like what's amazing about aviation is that it continues to evolve. And one of the things that we got to check out today, I'm part of the Veteran Fund as a limited partner. And it's a venture capital fund that looks for veteran founders and or veterans on the on the leadership staff of a startup, and looking for dual use technologies that can be used in the corporate or commercial sector as well as defense. And one of the companies that we invest in is called Firestorm, and they're actually here in San Diego area. So we got to check out their facility today, and it was really amazing what they're doing with drone technology and being able to make it very modular, low cost. So we're talking like a tenth of the cost of competitors out there. And what's amazing about that is you look at competitive advantage and you say, okay, well, how much better is your product compared to everything else out there? And when you can make something that's as good for 1/10 the cost, pretty incredible stuff. So amazing group of people that are working on solutions to help move our military and our coalition partners forward in that space. And we all think that drone technology with automation is definitely a huge part of the future for us, and they were kind of paving the way forward with some really amazing ideas.
Where do you see drone technology like 10 years from now as you look out into the future?
Man, I think there'll be so many interesting applications on the military as well as the commercial side. So on the military side specifically, I think we're seeing advancements in terms of automation, and instead of having somebody tied to it and doing something, you can now have certain levels of automation where it has a sensor, a camera, and whatever spectrum you want to use. Identifying things on the ground, whether it could be for, ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, or reconnaissance. It could be an actual one for kinetic effects, whether it's like impacting something or dropping something. But there's going to be a lot of autonomy in the future. And I think that's one of the things that allows us to leverage technology despite, numbers. And that's one really interesting thing. There have been a lot of open source articles about how we can pair up drones with fighter jets and how we can control them from a fighter cockpit. So that's pretty compelling. And then I think on the commercial side, people are always talking about how we're going to have automated aircraft, and we have obviously
the airlines
Tesla.
and stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like Tesla has self-driving vehicles, like self-driving airplanes, and a lot of people don't realize that airplanes, especially those big airplanes, are designed for two pilots. So the cockpit requires two people because you can't physically get to certain aspects of the cockpit without two people. So you'd have to redesign the airplanes to make them single pilot airplanes. And then there was an argument of like cargo airplanes going autonomous as well. And
But just for me, man, like, and I don't know about the general public, but I'd imagine there'd be a lot of people that would probably stop flying if there's like an unmanned aircraft without a pilot. Because I mean, there's a lot of times where there's emergency types of situation, and it's the pilot and the natural instincts that actually save the freaking aircraft. And you're talking ATC, you're pivoting. A lot of those in-flight emergencies are like humans are like, getting savvy with it, and they're getting creative in order to put the plane down. And so I would, at least myself, I would think twice about stepping into a unmanned or unpiloted aircraft.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, that's the fundamental talking point for people that are interested in aviation in the future, is that there's this concern of like automation and, whatever. And I'm like, no, like we still need people because, airline pilots make decent money. They're not getting paid to fly you from point A to point B, because the airplane, the automation, the autopilot, all those things can fly an airplane physically better than we can in terms of smooth, comfortable, etc. But when it comes to emergencies, you want somebody that's been well trained, and that's why Grant Cardone, pick anybody that's wealthy, has a jet. They want the best quality pilot they can have, because when those things break, you want to get on the ground safely and make sure that you, your family, your friends, your business partners, everybody is getting to the location safely. And that's where the experience, like you're mentioning, comes in. And I had a mishap in Alaska, actually,
Did
with
you?
F-22. Yeah.
What happened?
So there was a mechanical component on the airplane that broke in the left gear, and when I touched down, the left gear basically collapsed. Which, if you're in a very fast, expensive fighter jet, not great. And went off roading a little bit and so I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast recently, and they were talking about near-death experiences, et cetera. And I was within about 10 feet of not being here anymore. And that whole perspective kind of changed my outlook on life a little bit, and not a little bit, a lot of it. And I, lost both parents, had some death in close family members, in addition to my mom and dad. And those were big events, but also when you're faced with your own mortality, you really changes your perspective and outlook on life. And that experience, I've talked to plenty of people, and they were like, man, we're just, and I came to the same conclusion. And I was just very thankful that I was the one in the airplane when that happened, because if it was somebody less experienced, they could have, potentially hurt themselves or killed themselves, whatever it is, in this airplane crash. And I'm just so thankful to the instructors and grateful for the lessons they've taught me and the experience I've developed over time to, kind of get through that situation, which is pretty sketchy.
Yeah. Do they, like, when you guys are flying these jets, do all of them have the capability to eject?
All the Air Force fighters do.
What do they tell you guys as the pilots, or what do you guys train these pilots in terms of, like, at what point do you transition from like trying to save the aircraft to just punching out?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that's one of the things that I really kind of wrestle with afterwards, because in my mishap, the thought of ejecting never even crossed my mind at the time, because it all happened within fractions of seconds, and the mishap happening, my reaction time, the engines, spooling up to full power when they did, all those little minor miracles that had to happen to keep me alive and keep the airplane in the air, or like back in the air, were pretty crazy. But I never thought about ejecting at the time. And we teach people there are certain parameters if you're on the ground of like, hey, this is, if you're going off the runway at this airspeed, then consider ejecting. And usually when they say consider doing this, it's like a very strong recommendation. Like, you should probably do this, it's your best interest. But if you're airborne, there's really a lot of, if you're flying a single engine airplane or a 2-engine airplane and both engines quit, there are things like that where like you have to eject. And there's this scenario of, get out of the airplane now, or you have some time to think about it before you get out of the airplane. In the scenario where you don't have time to make a decision, now you're really relying upon instinct and training. And I think we do a phenomenal job in the military of kind of habituating all that training and that process. But to me, what it comes down to is, if you are still, and this is what I told the guys after my mishap too, I said, if you are still trying to fly the airplane, if you're trying to fix the situation, then keep flying it. If you're full Carrie Underwood, Jesus take the wheel, then get out of the airplane, like, because ultimately it's your family, it's your life, all these people that depend upon you, love you, care about you. If you're done flying the airplane, then get out. That's what it's there for. It's just to save you. We can replace the airplanes, or we can find other solutions, but we can't replace the pilot. We can't replace the invaluable piece and part they play in their families' lives. So if you're going to keep flying the airplane and try to fix the problem, then keep doing it. Like, Godspeed to you. If you're not, then get out.
But don't you want pilots that are like, mentally, they're like, hey, I'm gonna fly this plane until I have to eject, versus, hey, I'm just gonna eject because I'm over it?
For sure, yeah. That's what I'm saying, is like, we want people to keep using their experience and training to keep flying the airplane, solve the issues, and get on the ground. There have been ejecting out of a fighter jet's not common at all.
Yeah.
Like, it is not common.
I got a question. What about like in the jets where there's two pilots? What if one pilot's like, I'm ready to eject, and another person's like, no, we got this? What happens there?
That's where the trust piece comes in, right? So in those 2-seat airplanes, there are a couple different options. You can have the rear seat pilot, who's typically either a navigator, a radio officer, or a weapons system officer, pull the handles, and both people go out. That could be in a scenario where if I'm flying in a fighter jet that's 2 seats, let's say I had a bird impact, right? Like I hit a bird and it goes to the canopy and takes me out. So I'm unconscious. I may not be dead, but I may be unconscious. I'm now relying and trusting on the backseat to pull the handle so we both get out of the airplane. And vice versa. Like things could happen where somebody's incapacitated and you're relying on the other person. So really it's a conversation, but there was a mishap in 2012 in the Middle East when I was there. And it was in a Strike Eagle, so an F-15E that has 2 seats. And the backseater is actually the one that initiated the ejection because the front seater was coming in to land. It was dark and there was really no cultural lighting. So it's like a black abyss of light, and coming to land on an arc. So you get spatially disoriented, and the backseater recognized what was happening and pulled the handles and was able to survive. The front seater didn't make it, but the backseater survived. And the only reason he did was because he recognized it and pulled the handles. And once again, going back to the trust we have in the airplanes between the crews and between other pilots as well.
Yeah, that's crazy what you guys do, man. So the Challenger jet that you're flying now, it's got to be a whole different chill level of just mellow versus what you were doing before, yeah?
It is. It's once again, it's rewarding in very different ways.
Yeah. A lot of like just take off autopilot type of thing. And
yeah, I look at it in the sense that I think most pilots want to fly airplanes, and I get that. But to me, as a corporate pilot, my whole job is to get the passengers from point A to point B safely and comfortably. And if the automation can do that, if the autopilot can do it better than I can in terms of like smoother level off, smoother turns, and all those things, then I'd rather use it. I'm there to take off, land, work any problems, troubleshoot, and all those things. But yeah, like I don't do it for the thrill of flying. I do it because I get to work for somebody that's amazing that I respect a ton, and it's obviously a great paycheck, great quality of life, and those things are more important to me, especially after the demonstration team job where I was on the road 250 days a year. Like I was always gone, and now I have a much better quality of life doing something that's not as fun flying, but it's it's a different reward in terms of my interaction with and ability to learn from people that are amazing and successful in their own careers.
yeah, I love that, dude. Question for you. What is the best way for someone, like just say myself, that wants to go up into a fighter jet and just do a tour, like maybe at a Miramar or like whatever, Coronado? What's the best way to go about something like that?
So I think it's very difficult to get in the backseat of like a frontline fighter. I'm not sure what the Marine Corps and the Navy process is. I know the Air Force, you would work through the Public Affairs Office on base, and really the Air Force is, and both well, I guess all three, the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, really want to find people that are going to be aligned with their values and national defense and all those things. And if there's somebody that's has a compelling story, like, hey, I started here, I'm here now, and I've done all these amazing things for my community, the people around me, then oftentimes like the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds will fly those people as well. So working with Public Affairs Office at specific bases, the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels will all do like hometown hero flights at every air show. And they'll find, like first responders or teachers or people that are influential in the community. And obviously you'd fit that category of people that are like doing amazing things in the community and helping share knowledge and experience and skills to really elevate people's lives. That I think makes a whole lot of sense and something that, you could partner with one of those two teams and get in the backseat of one of those jets. And
That would be so sick,
I
dude.
think, it's just
So
like,
wait till like the Thunderbirds or Blue Angels are coming to town and then kind of reach out a little bit earlier, or what?
yeah, we can chat offline after this and we can figure out ways to connect you with the right people on the team because they have a public affairs officer on each of those teams that can then coordinate that stuff when they're here for a show. I'm not sure. So I flew the Miramar Air Show in 2022, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so sick.
Anybody that went to the Miramar Air Show in 2022, I was flying there with F-22 and then also with Heritage Flight. Steve Hinton was flying the P-51 Mustang, which was the P-51 Mustang was the most iconic and still is the most iconic, U.S. Air Force fighter.
Yeah, it sounds like a
And-
beast.
Oh man, it sounds incredible. It has this like high pitched howl that when it's coming in fast and you're off the nose of it, like it just sounds like this menacing howl, and you're like, that's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful airplane and it sounds amazing.
I love it. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming down, Josh. I love talking shop with the aviation stuff, man. And dude, we gotta connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Post this, and I'd love to go up with you sometime, dude. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we'll get it all on video. It'll be great.
Yeah, I'd love it. We'll get the content game in. Where can the folks get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
So on Instagram, it's at Cabo Gunderson, CABO GUNDERSON. That's on Instagram, and then I've got YouTube as well, and then also LinkedIn, just Joshua Cabo Gunderson. So all those all those platforms are available, and then we're releasing some new stuff here, kind of going through fighter pilot mentality and processes. So I think one of the great things about the fighter pilot community is that over time, through experience, they refined, how do we plan, brief, execute, and debrief things in very dynamic scenarios that are high stakes environments, and how do we distill that into information that people can use in their personal life as well as in business. And we're trying to use that to share those knowledge pieces with people. And ultimately, Uplift Aviation Foundation is the nonprofit that I'm starting. And that's going to be taking young adults flying and veterans flying and kind of sharing their insights into life and sharing via socials. Because I think, the more collaboration we do with amazing individuals, especially as they're more closely related in age and demographics to like the 15-year-old kid who's kind of wandering and lost in high school, how do we tap into that potential? They have an amazing influence in their future if they apply their knowledge and skills correctly. So how do we capture that? And but anyways, those are things I'm working on. But the social media platforms to find me.
I love it. Well, keep crushing, dude, and excited to go up with you here soon. He's Josh Gunderson. I'm Rich Summers. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.